In this demo, I'm going to show you how pod anti-affinity works. So I'm in the Affinity folder, and here I have a pod anti-affinity YAML file. I have again my first deployment, the pod affinity, and then I have a second one, pod affinity 2. That is the same one as the previous one, so it's pod affinity app in pod affinity 1. So this one will be co-located to the first pod. It's the Redis container. And then I have another one, the pod affinity 3, and the pod affinity 3 has pod anti-affinity. And the anti-affinity is, if the app is pod affinity 1, then don't schedule on the same host name. So let's try this one. kubectl create pod anti-affinity. There's a fourth one, but I will first show you the third one, and then I will show you how the fourth one works. kubectl get pod minus all wide. Pod affinity 1 is running on 181. Pod affinity 2, those three are running, all of them on 181 because these are co-located. And the next one, the pod affinity 3, also three of them are scheduled on another node because they cannot be on the same node as pod affinity 1. So this is all working. This one, pod affinity 3, is using anti-affinity to make sure that it doesn't get scheduled on the same node as pod affinity 1. Let's have a look at the pod affinity 4. So I have one more here. This pod affinity 4 says I have pod anti-affinity. The match expression is app in pod affinity 1 and 3. So this pod cannot be scheduled on a node of the same node host name of pod affinity 1 and pod affinity 3. So if you have a look at kubectl get nodes, we only have two nodes here. This is the first node, pod affinity 1 is running on it, and then we have the second node that ends with 46, and we have pod affinity 3 running on it. So pod affinity 4 needs to be not on a node where pod affinity 1 is running and not on a node where pod affinity 3 is running. So there are no nodes because I only have two nodes. So if I do kubectl describe pod affinity 4, then 0 out of 3 nodes are available. The first one is the master, so I cannot schedule on that one. And the other ones are, because of the anti-affinity rule, I cannot schedule on any node because it's just not possible. Now, the pod doesn't schedule because we used the required flag. If you have a look, pod anti-affinity.yaml, we used required during scheduling, ignore during execution. So let's say if we change this into the preferred one, what would happen then? I have this already prepared in pod anti-affinity5.yaml. Here we have pod affinity 5 defined. And the only thing that is different here is that I have preferred during scheduling, ignore during execution. You have to give the weight, you have to use the keyword pod affinity term, and then we have a label selector. Expression is exactly the same, app in pod affinity 1 and 3. So because this is anti-affinity, if there's already a pod 1 or a pod 3, it cannot be scheduled on that node because we're using host name as topology key. Let's run this. kubectl create pod anti-affinity number 5.yaml. Let's have a look at our pods, all white. So this is our 4, it's pending, and this is our 5th, which is running. So you can see it is now running on the same node as our pod affinity 2 because we have preferred instead of required. So it still gets scheduled even though it's not an ideal match. So that's it for pod anti-affinity. So you can play around with it a bit. And if you have any questions, you can always use the Q&A to ask me questions about pod affinity or pod anti-affinity, or if you get stuck somewhere.